Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. It's brilliant. I can see you all beginning to pop in now. Can see people joining. Delighted to have you with us for this morning's webinar. First things first, as usual, please can somebody pop onto the chat, let us know that you can see our holding slide and that you can hear me. It'd be great to know that that's all working at your end, so just pop in. While you're doing that, the weekly weather update from Mayo, it is raining here this morning, but apparently the sunshine is on its way back, so hopefully we'll have the sun back. That's great. Thanks Dee, thanks Adrian, thanks Anthony, thanks Orla. Hi Siobhan, hi Septa, brilliant. Okay, you can all hear me. So most of you know me at this stage. I'm Fiona Stoney, a consultant here with Great Place to Work, and I'm delighted to welcome you back to our next Staying Connected webinar, The Champion Mindset. If the context is the kingdom, then content is king. We're delighted to welcome Gary Keegan here with us this morning, and to have Cathal Divley returning on the Great Place to Work webinar team, and he'll be doing his intros shortly. I suppose just before we kick off into it all this morning, just to, I suppose, pass on our feelings to Bewley's. Bewley's Cafe were certified as a great place to work earlier in 2019, and it was a heavy heart. We saw the news last night come through from them, so kind of sending our wishes to them and the team. It was a privilege to be able to work with them, and I personally had that privilege. So just thinking of them all this morning. Okay, so over the last number of weeks in webinars, we've done our best to respond to the kind of conversations we've been having with you all and the insights that you've been bringing and the challenges that you've been facing. And we've gone through a series of different things. We've talked about building and maintaining trust in virtual teams. We've done some stuff around how individuals are facing uncertainty at this time, how organizations can support well-being. We have had our COVID Care 19 survey, and we've brought you some data insights and some practical kind of actionable insights from organizations on that as well. And today we really want to get in underneath leadership and look at the legacy that all of your leadership is going to have during this time and moving forward. And as we begin to look ahead to the weeks coming, we're delighted that we're going to be hearing from further from our Great Place to Work community, from our Great Place to Work ambassador, Jarlath Dooley, from Great Place to Work teams and the role that they're playing at the moment. And also just to give you a heads up that we're going to be having our Most Trusted Leader session with Declan Roynan on June 11th. So if any of your leadership do want to get the exclusive invite to that, do let us know. We're going to start building those invites shortly. So as I said, this content has all been shaped by your feedback. Please do keep it coming, and I'd encourage you to keep that sharing happening across the Great Place to Work community. Bit of housekeeping for a handover. So we are going to be wrapping up within the hour, hopefully, as usual. The slides and the recordings will be available afterwards. And I usually say, so no need to furiously scribble notes, but I'm pretty sure Gary's going to be encouraging you to take some notes. So if you have a bit of piece of paper and a notebook nearby, grab it now before we get going. We are going to have a break halfway through, and then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. Some of you have pre-submitted your questions, and please do keep them coming in through the chat and the Q&A, and we'll do our best to handle those as they come in. Right, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Cathal Divley, and look forward to chatting to you halfway through and towards the end. So good morning, everybody, and handing you over to Cathal.
Thanks a lot, Fiona. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all well. Hope friends and family are safe and healthy wherever you are in the country. So I guess, look, part of our response to the COVID situation was to put on these webinars every Thursday, 10 a.m. We decided to brand the webinars and the content under this idea of staying connected. And it's because of you on this call, giving an hour of your time every Thursday. It's because of your comments, your suggestions, you're shaping the future content for the webinars. It's because of all of that energy that you've brought that I think has given substance to this idea of staying connected. So thank you for that. We are going to get through this. We're a little bit unsure as to when that will be, but we will come out the other side. And what we do know is that the actions and behaviors that we demonstrate now as leaders will have a lasting impact on our people and our culture. They'll have a lasting impact on our people and our culture. And I know Fiona talked about the idea of leadership legacy there. So how do we, given where we are now, how do we show up as leaders for our teams? How do we demonstrate leadership through adversity? There are a couple of things and more things that we'll discuss on today's webinar. So we're really delighted that Gary is joining us today, Gary Keegan. Gary has, I know Gary many years now, and Gary has immersed himself in high performing environments in business and in sport. I know for some of you on the call, Gary has worked with you and your leadership teams already. We've partnered with him on workshops and events. And we're delighted that Gary has joined us and going to bring a stimulus to what we know is a really important area around how we battle through this adversity that we're facing at the moment. So look, we'll have two parts to the session. We'll take a pause halfway through. We'll have some comments, some conversation. So pens and paper at the ready, but also use the chat function to put in your questions. We really want you to be part of this conversation. And thanks everyone for joining us. And Gary, my friend, I will hand over to you.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Fania, for the introduction. And thanks everybody for plugging into this session this morning. I'm really looking forward to it. And I've found myself in this position of trying to create some content around this. And it's been a really interesting journey so far. So I'm going to share some ideas, some thoughts. Potentially not everything here is for everybody. Some of you will find yourself in somewhat different situations with regard to your business, with regard to your senior teams, and with regard to your own leadership. But I'm pretty certain that there's something for everybody. So as Fania mentioned, it's important just to have your notebook and pen on the ready. And I'm going to go at this a little bit, so I'll get lost in it and I'll attack it, and I might slam the desk every now and again. So don't worry too much if I get carried away. But I'm really trying to, I guess, reinforce some of the elements that you guys are already nailing. Just reinforce that potentially you're doing the right thing. And also potentially highlight some areas that may be gap areas for you or your organization that you might want to consider and reflect upon coming out of this. So it'll kind of take a journey around absorbing the impact of COVID-19. And I'm sure we're fatigued by hearing that term, but that's the big global context right now, and responding appropriately to that. Then seeking out the opportunity and adversity, and kind of looking into and being curious about the adversity and not fearful of it. And then the leader's mind, what does that need to be? Is it currently providing focus for you, for your organization, or is it providing distraction? And what does the leader's mind need to be to get that focus right? And then we'll close out a little bit around the importance of running your race, maintaining your resilience and regenerating yourself and team, and finishing strong. So that's it. So that's what we're going to go into. So I'm going to open up with a short 10-20 second video, which is kind of looking at my work and some of the people that I've worked with in sport, and some of the characteristics or principles or values that are important to these guys. So have a listen, and we'll have a chat about it once it's over. Apologies. Please just run that through. I doubled that up for all the anti-Dublin fans out there. No, I think there's some characteristics that are critical in normal times that may also be critical in crisis times. Things like perseverance, discipline, being committed, impact obsessed. And that's a huge one for me. What is the impact that we're ultimately trying to achieve? You know, can we define what the intention is in this kind of grey and foggy uncertainty that we're in right now. The role of team, the importance of team, never has team been more important. Through this adversity, can we really understand the relationships we have and how important team is to our organization? Determination, preparation, belief, focus, all those things remain critical in this time as they do in normal times. But maybe we can find a greater level of value in those things during this period. And maybe we can also find a greater level of value in our relationships and what's important in that regard. So when we look at this impact, when I look at it, I like to look at this crisis in phases, as opposed to just one long crisis, how long will it last, etc. And we look at that first part, it might have been 10 to 15 days of trying to respond and react and get our people settled around the technology, working from home, etc. The next period might have been the following 2 weeks where we're kind of getting things stabilized. People are getting used to engaging on different platforms, whether it be Zoom or Microsoft Teams. We're having our meetings and our calls, and we're trying to follow an agenda and trying to get people focused on what they need to focus on. But what does the next phases look like? So if we're just getting people organized around being able to have a conversation and get into the discussion around what they need to do next, well then where does the focus need to be going on from that? So to what extent do you feel you can influence what happens next? Well, if we're only depending on what the government is telling us or how these events are unfolding, well, we're in a bit of trouble. We can't really influence what happens next outside of our own context. We can only influence how we're going to respond. And it's important that we're in that space of owning that. We're controlling what we can control. Another key aspect is with a champion's mindset, or as a leader, we need ownership. When difficult situations, champions step in. It doesn't mean that they don't feel doubt. It doesn't mean that they're not questioning themselves at times, but they're taking ownership of the situation or the crisis and they're standing up. So what is the likelihood that your senior team are acting right now and acting appropriately, no matter how small that is, to improve the situation? What are you observing in yourself? And what are you observing in your leadership teams? And how is that providing leadership for the employees within the organization itself? Are you in a high state right now around that? Or do you find yourself somewhere in the middle, or you're well behind where you need to be? So that's a key piece, that ownership and responding well to what's in front of you. Another element is a consideration around the reach of this particular crisis and event, and to what degree the adversity will spill into other parts of people's lives. And as a leader, I think it's important to recognize that you're a human being as well. You have a partner, potentially, you have a family, you might have children in the household, you're trying to work from home also, you might have two people working in the space, you're trying to navigate around who gets what time and gets what space when. And that's going to create some friction potentially in the household and some stress. So how it's affecting you as a leader is important, because I guess what's personal can often be universal. So it's important that we communicate on the basis of some of the vulnerability and the struggle that we're feeling, so that we can recognize how other people might be experiencing it also. And I think when we recognize how other people are experiencing it, well, we can adjust and create a different structure around how we manage people through this and how we respond to that. Another big thing around a crisis, I guess, is resilience or endurance. So how do we keep our concentration over the longer term? If the game is 70 plus minutes, we need to hold our concentration for every second of the game. We lose our concentration for the last 2 minutes, it can write off the 73 minutes of good work. So we really need to stay in this game day by day, day by day, day by day. We'll have a sense of, right, what it might look like. Is it going to be 8 weeks? Is it going to be 12 weeks for my business? Is it going to be 16 weeks? And what do I need to be doing? What's my contingency planning within that space? So what decisions will affect your current performance today, this week? And what decisions will affect the business readiness to perform when you step back into the next normal, when you step back into your arena? And they're the two pieces, the operational need, the immediate need, and the future need. And some of those decisions may affect the next 60 days. Some of those decisions may affect the next 12 to 24 months. And that's where you need to be in your headspace. Not just what do we need to do today, but what do we need to do to ensure that we're ready when we step out of this space. So there is no education like adversity, and that's not always the case, but certainly when you're embracing adversity, when you're curious about adversity, you can learn a lot about yourself, your organization, and your relationships. And for all the leaders that I've spoke to in my career, when I asked them what was the biggest lesson you've ever learned, they all to a dark period in their life, a mistake, a personal experience, or something that went wrong with regards to a failure. That was this point where I learned most about myself and less about the summits or the great achievements that they have. Leaders generally don't talk about those things when they're expressing lessons. They often talk about the adversity in their lives. So I think we need to, in some way, embrace the adversity of it, talk a little bit about the opportunity that's in it, be curious about that as leaders, as leadership teams, and to be able to drill some of that into our communication with our people. So how are you showing up so far? Because how you showed up in the first 3 weeks may be different to how you're showing up in the next 3 weeks. Some people have come into this and knocked it out of the park for the first 5 weeks and then ran right into a wall. Right, and the team are looking at them and saying, "Oh, Jesus, you know, Johnny was flying up to that. I wonder what has happened." And now they're struggling because they don't know what's next. And those people we have to reach the hand out and pull them in. We have to recognize that they might be experiencing a wobble right now. And you and your teammates will experience that. So I want you just to pause for maybe 5 or 6 seconds and just write down the top 3 things that come to your mind. How are you showing up? How are you showing up so far? What's it been like for you? Because I think that's a question, right, that we could pause and just ask the senior team about. How are we showing up so far? We don't have to pretend we're bulletproof when we're feeling a bit less so. We don't have to pretend about stuff. We have to be now open and honest. We have to be sharing some of the experience in the way that we're having it. We have to use the team, we have to lean on the team, and we have to be there for the team. So I think that's really, really important. If context is the kingdom, and we're always dealing with a local and a global context. In normal business, we're always dealing with that. The global context is everything outside of our own doors. The local context is everything inside of our own business walls. But this context is very different than anything that we've ever faced before. Of that, there's no question, because it's affected every facet of life, every facet, not just business, every facet of life. It's affected your customers, it's affected your key stakeholders, shareholders, it's affected your employees, it's affected you personally. So it's affected at so many different levels. It's affected your business, it's affected your home life. So there's so many different elements in it. But if the context is the kingdom, well, then we get to dance in that. Right? So our content then is king, right? We need to be clear on what our content is. We need to be saying that our content will define how well we come out the other side of this. Ultimately, our content is around our behaviors. Our content is around our decisions. Our content is around our care for our people. Our content is around our character and what's materializing from us as a result of the experience of this context that we have. So content is king. What has our content been? What does it need to be today? What does it need to be next week? So we have to keep redefining our content to ensure that it's actually helping us to navigate in this fog. It's almost like there's a summit there. We're on a mountain. We know we're on a mountain. We're on a path, but the summit has a big, big cloud on top of it. We can't see it. We don't know where it is. We don't know if our path is going to lead to it, but we're on a path. And so we need to make decisions. What step next? There's forces hitting us, but our compass looks like it's off. We're not sure, but we need to make those decisions and adjust afterwards. Some of our decisions will be really good and some of our decisions won't be so good, but we can adjust. But we need to make decisions, and that's critical. Ultimately, that's how we're going to be measured. So when we look at overthinking, are we getting, imprisoned by that future state, afraid to make a call, waiting on someone else to tell us what we need to do, whether that's government or whatever else, or are we taking ownership? That fear of being wrong, that indecision, that feeling like you're in a prison. You might find that as an individual with the responsibilities you have. You might see that in your own leaders. You might see that in the leader, the CEO of the organization. You might be witnessing that in them now or for periods, right? So that's natural. It's natural that that's how something like this will impact us. But the best place to be is in the driving seat. We're just being pushed. What crisis does, it takes us out of automatic state and puts us into a conscious state. We're in a conscious state right now, and we need to be in the bus driving it. We need to be very, very clear that we're putting her into first gear, into second gear, back down to first, handbrake on, handbrake off, and drive this thing forward. We need to be in the day, present state, in the now, being decisive, knowing that we're making decisions each day, each week for the business, and for the health of the business, and for the health of our employees. And ultimately, we'll be defined by our behaviors. All success is defined by behaviors. All performance is behavior. So what are our behaviors this time? And if we think about what's informing our decisions, the three key questions I want you to consider are who and what are your information sources? So it's for certain we're all getting a source through government. And we're all getting a source potentially through Great Place to Work, or we're getting a source through IBEC. There might be different elements that we're saying these are good sources of information for me. But your employees may also be getting sources from social media, from Twitter. Could be driving anxiety and stress. And if you as a leader or a leadership team are not distilling what's in that information down to what's really effective and important to your organization and employees, well, then there's something going to far wrong. So how are these shaping your decisions and your communications on a daily basis? And are you backing your own intelligence? Are you backing your own knowledge of the business? Because we can lose sight of what we know. You know the business better than anyone else knows it. Don't depend on outside parties to determine what you need to do to ensure that the business is the best place it can be coming out the other side of this. So use the information well, distill what's important, but bring your own sense of intelligence to that and your own insight. So you've heard this term lots of times, and I think when a term is overused, it loses value. But for me, it never loses value. So control the controllables, and what's really going to separate your team in the marketplace with your competitors is what you decide is important. So there are plenty of controllables, and there are a hell of a lot more uncontrollables. But it's about what you decide is important. And that takes courage as a leader. That's your job. That's your responsibility, right? You have to show the courage. That has to be part of your character this time. You have to provide the decision, right, that moves. You have to decide on what's the focus. What is the priority? So what's in your control as a team and as a leader? And what are you deciding is most important with regard to that? It's important also to share and release the uncontrollables with your employees. Now, that can only be done when you've done it yourself, when you have a sense of what releasing the uncontrollables looks like, and you know the difficulty of releasing them. Because when we're applying energy to uncontrollables, we're taking energy away from what's within our control. So that's critical. So when we look at this blue state, we make choices that challenge our organization. Continue to challenge our employees in a good way. You challenge them by telling them you believe in them. You challenge them by telling them that you want them to act. You challenge them by asking them to do the right thing and bring the performance. Bring it on now. And you do stuff, right, that composes you and composes the team. And when I say compose, you're like the conductor. How are you going to get the sound? How are you going to get the energy out of your own team? Produce what you're trying to produce as a result of what choices you're making. So make decisions that give the business the best chance of a strong reset coming out the other side. But depending on where your organization is, these things are still critical. So it's a bit like the polar bear. Napoleon Bonaparte says, take time to deliberate, for sure, but when the time for action has arrived, stop thinking and go, right? Is this the right move? Is this the right piece of advice? Like, because if the polar bear is asking himself that all the time, he's going to be left with a very cold swim back to the mainland, right? And he's not going to take the opportunity to fish well here. He has to make this jump, right? And we've got to make that step. We don't know on the other side of it if solid ground is going to be there, but we've got to make the jump, right? And I think fear, there's bad fear. So bad fear is when we're allowing it to control us, when we're allowing it to limit us. And there's good fear, when we're curious about it, and when we know it's pushing us out of our comfort zone, and we step into that space. That's good fear, right? We vanquish fear by stepping into it. That doesn't mean mistakes won't happen. That doesn't mean that we won't get things wrong. But if we get more things right than wrong, we have a really, really good chance of getting out the other side. The research would say that the differentiation between an organization that comes out healthy and an organization that doesn't come out healthy is intelligent decisions. The leaders made intelligent decisions. Now, I know that they can only be judged afterwards. So you need to make those decisions and hope by the end of this that those decisions are intelligent. So that's the opening phase of the session. And I want you to think about this tree and this storm and how it's hitting you right now, and how the forces of the storm are changing, and you're having to adjust and adapt to that change. And this experience that you're having. And you have a culture within your organization that's either serving you well or not serving you well. But you probably need something a little bit different over this time. So what are you as a team going to stand for? Is this a question you even asked, right? What are we as a team going to stand for? What does it mean? When we talk about legacy, we often think about the legacy of our life or the legacy of our career. What does that mean? And we generally never talk about legacy in the shorter term. Yet legacy is probably massively important. If this thing lasts 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, whatever it is, the legacy of our leadership will be observed, will be left. And the big question is, what will that legacy be? Will it be a positive legacy for the business and for the employees of the business, or will it be a negative legacy? So I'm going to ask you to pause for maybe 3 or 4 minutes and write down what values or principles or character traits do you want to see in your leadership over this time? What will you truly stand for? What can you say at the end that we will be measured by these 3 things? These 3 things will be a measurement of our leadership. And if we deliver these things, we will be happy that we've done the right thing for our organization. So take that 3 or 4 minutes to just reflect upon those and write them into your notebook.
Gary, I might pose a question there, just while the audience are going through those questions, if that's all right.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm interested in this the decisiveness piece, Gary, right? So of course we want to collaborate with our teams to kind of move things on. Where's that point, that tension, if you like, between collaboration and decisiveness, and kind of making the decision? How do you see that area?
Well, it's important not to confuse collaboration with consensus. So decision by consensus is potentially never good in a crisis. And then it's important also then to qualify collaboration. So I think it's important to have the right people in the room, people who can actually contribute something to the decision itself. Sometimes we'll build the numbers, or we have to consult X and consult Y, and that's because the leaders themselves lack confidence in making the call, right? And we have to also know where the decision lies. Does it lie within our senior executive, or does it lie at a level down from us? So I think that's critical. But speed is always important in decision making. A fear of failure with regard to decision, it's important that you get past that, because you can always adjust post it. And there's always an opportunity to adjust and improve your decision once it's made. So I think they're the critical elements. Don't go for consensus. That doesn't help anyone. If you're going for collaboration, select the people that will make the decision stronger. But speed is of the essence. So people are not given time here to doss around with the stuff. Speed is of the essence. So I think they're my responses to that.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, Gary, just we've had a question in from the floor specifically. Actually, maybe before I jump into that, for anybody who wants to share those 3 or 4 things with the panel, you can pop it straight to us as panelists, or you can pop it to us afterwards. We'd be really interested to hear what those measurements are that you're hoping to see at the end of all this. Yeah, so Gary, one question from the floor is around learning as a team, and I suppose this person in particular has a challenge around the team being adaptive. So while they're demonstrating leadership, it's kind of how do you keep the team on board, and how do you keep that team learning? Just a question in there.
I think the best way to do it is to recognize that we're all out of familiar waters here, and to talk a little bit about the vulnerability of that. So that requires, when we're vulnerable, that requires us to be a little bit more creative, and that requires us to be a little bit more curious, right? So a curiosity for me is less about certainty. It's more about, right, trying to come up with really good questions, not trying to come up with really good answers, trying to come up with really, really good questions for the team, so that it stimulates and motivates the team, right, to be creative, to look at what's important within the group. So that adaptiveness needs to be something that's managed consistently. We adapted this week, or we adapted in the first 5 weeks, now we don't need to adapt anymore. You will feel, as it goes on, potentially that different individuals on the team will start to tighten up a bit, will start to struggle a bit. So it's being curious about how people are experiencing it within the team. And using that language. What are we curious about right now? How are we experiencing it right now? And being very frank with people. We need you to be honest. No bullshit here. Lay it out on the table. We need to know what's hurting you. We need to know what's holding you back, because we're going to pull you up with us, right? And tomorrow I might need you to pull me up. So I think it's that's that adaptiveness. I guess we have to keep recognizing the importance of it as a muscle over this time. Will I move?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's on your mind, leader? If our mind leads our body in the direction of our most dominant thoughts, well, then what's informing our most dominant thoughts? How are we helping to keep our mind in the right place so that we step into the things we need to step into? So I've looked at 5 elements here that you might find useful. To consider, where am I? How could I answer these questions? Can I answer them? So my first one is around your intention. What do you expect from yourself or from the team? And how are you using the assets you have or the team has to ensure you get the best from yourself? So can you answer that? Do you have a set of answers for that? If you don't, that's going to affect, right, how your mind performs. Your clarity, what is your purpose right now? So I knew my purpose before I come into this, but has it slightly changed? You know, am I going to look after key relationships? Am I going to do a different role in the context of what we're doing here? So what part am I playing during this crisis? And have I got a sense of purpose? Or if I'm looking at the organization, does our purpose need to change? Is there an opportunity for us to become more purposeful during this time? So utilizing what you can in that space and trying to bring clarity to your mind around that. And then your attention, once your intention is a bit clearer, your attention becomes easier. So where does your attention need to be to maximize your impact? And do I have it on those things? You know, am I being focused? Am I being clear? Is my attention in the right things, on the right things? And can I deselect my attention and then select another attention? because I find the move and the shift of this thing. So that's just keeping yourself conscious of what your focus is on. And then this self-care piece is massive. You cannot lead others well unless you're leading yourself well first. So how is your superpower being regenerated? What does your recovery look like? What's your sleep look like? What's your exercise? What are you doing to help you be the best that you can be? And I think when you find things that work, then you can tell other people, right? I struggle with this and I struggle with that, and this is what I did, and this is how it helps me. This really helps me. Or you're talking to a peer and they're saying, you know what, I can't, this is what I did. This is what I did. I put this around, I had this discussion, and it helped me to get to that place. So talk, share your own struggle so that others will share theirs, and that will be very powerful. But if you get 1 to 4 in place, you have some degree of order around that. It's not about being perfect, but it's about bringing some clarity to your mind. What it does is it helps, like when is your self-talk driving you forward? When is it holding you back? Well, it's often holding you back when you don't have clarity on these other areas, right? And what are you saying internally to give your best self the stage to dance? So what does my dance look like? I might need a few different moves, right? There might be things that I have to do now that I wouldn't have had to do before. I feel a little bit uncomfortable about that, but you know what? I'm stepping into it because that's what's needed right now. I'm a leader and I'm here to respond. So that might be a model that you want to bring your own team through, or something that you want to bring yourself through. Because I think just trying to answer these questions would certainly bring you forward. The other key area is around vulnerability. Your perspective can become your prison. The perspective of the team can become our prison. So watch out for the perspectives. Get the perspectives aired. Get them aired. Hear them in the conversations around the meeting, around the table. Hear those perspectives and watch out for the ones that could be imprisoning the individual or could be imprisoning the collective around the table. Vulnerability is only a weakness when we cover it up. It's only a weakness. Now, I'm not talking about vulnerability by way of people moaning and complaining and, you're not there to be an agony aunt, but you're there to recognize that this is a very vulnerable time. And within vulnerability, there is strength, there is growth, there is opportunity for us to learn. When we're shown vulnerability, we can be very powerful. So how would a leader do that? Well, he'd be humble. She'd be humble. She'd be honest. She'd be saying, I would find this difficult myself. I am finding it difficult. I can imagine what you're experiencing there. However, this is what I'm doing to respond to it. I'm not trying to brush over my vulnerability. I'm trying to use it to be creative. I'm trying to use it to change my own behavior, that type of stuff. Now, I would say within this period that we can not abuse, but we can utilize vulnerability to change things within our organization. Things that we wouldn't have been able to change in normal time or would have been very difficult, may be much more easier to change now. I think people are more open to change and being creative around how they look at the model. Because when the organization is vulnerable, its people are vulnerable. So organization and people being vulnerable gives us an opportunity to be creative, to innovate, and to change. So this is a real opportunity. How can you be better as a team? How can you be better culturally? How can you be better in terms of your operating model? What is it that you're going after? How can you be better in your structure? When you look at that interdependency across functions, across teams, and you're frustrated by the lack of working, the lack of cooperation and collaboration, you can get in and deal with that now. So there's an opportunity to get ahead of the curve here. Uncertainty has, I'm sure, already visited, and it will visit more. Of that, there's no question. So some of the strategies that you could utilize to deal with that, face whatever fear you might have. Face it head on, right? Worrying about the future is pointless. It's absolutely pointless. You've got to be saying that in your head. This is pointless, right? Don't ask what if, ask what will I do if. So in sport, when we look at what if scenarios, we're always looking to the counter of it. So we're always looking to what empowers us if that happens. What would empower us if this happens? So how would we act, right? So that puts you in a strength of power. And the other thing is knowing how you'll turn up takes the sting out of the worry. So you're saying, I'm deciding how I turn up here. We are deciding how we turn up here, right? We're deciding that. And when we decide that, we don't worry about what the future will hold. We decide how we're going to walk into the future. And leading through this is very much about constructing the future. It's very much about constructing the future as a leader, as a leadership team. Focus your attention daily and try and help people to focus their attention daily. Don't use your energy on things you can't affect, right? Focus what you can affect. Focus on what you can affect. Have your focus and comms nailed every day. So if you're able to do that, when you sit on a Zoom, you have value to add. You ask, what value do I add today? What value do I add today? What do I want to communicate today? And what impact do I want that communication to have? Because the impact of the communication will very much define what it is you're saying in those contexts. No days lost, guys. No days lost. Every day is a value day. Our brand, our customers, our trust, our values, every day, right, is an opportunity to leave something positive behind, right? Know you are adaptive. Talk to your team about being adaptive and trust your choices. Tell the team we need to trust our choices. I think that's critical. New skills. So look at what skills you need in your locker as you navigate this. So is there some skills that you wouldn't have needed that now you can develop? What are you finding within yourself? And then stress and anxiety can be decreased by movement, by exercise. I don't want you to become a super athlete. There are some people out there that are doing some phenomenal stuff, but just do exercise. Just get up every morning, have a routine. Maybe before the kids get up, have a routine. Get your 30 minutes in, just get a good sweat, get a good heart rate up, feel good, get that out of your system, then get a good breakfast, a good healthy breakfast. Put in some brain nutrient. Make sure that you're sharp and clear. Feel as if when you're doing and preparing for yourself, that you feel good about yourself. When you're preparing yourself, you feel good. When you're taking care of yourself, you feel good. And a little bit of space to be silent. A little bit of space around meditation. Find that. It's in the evening when the kids are gone to bed. Just a little moment in a little corner of the house where it's yours, or a walk around the block, whatever it is. Find that moment of meditation. Avoid comparing where you should be with where you are. Just own it. That's a real issue, comparing where we should be. Let that go. It's not controllable. Compare where you are, right? And reach out and speak to someone you trust. That's the message we should be giving to our people. Reach out, lean on the team. We're here to help. Beyond that, it's sustaining myself and my energy over the longer term. What does that look like? It's hard for you to care for others, both in your family home and in your organization, if you're not caring for yourself. And that's not being selfish. It really is important that you care for yourself. A little bit of exercise, watching your nutrition during this time. 3 good meals a day, not snacking at the press all the time in between, eating more than you should. Watch the food you're putting into your system. Is that helping you to perform? Get good sleep. Go to bed at the same time every night. Wake up at the same time every morning. Make your bed when you get out of the bed. Be disciplined around that. That will help your mind. Put your feet on the floor and say, here we go again. I'm ready for the day. I get to start again. Right? And a bit of meditation within that space. And journal your experience. So if you're planning to go into tomorrow and nail it, well then before you go to bed at night, have your focus laid down in your diary. Say, I have these 3 meetings, I have these 5 meetings. This is what my focus is. This is what I'm trying to get across. Ultimately, you want to be on the upward curve so that when you come out the other side of this, you're ready to perform, but you're also performing in the now. You're accepting the change, you're adjusting your methods, and you're stepping into high performance leadership. Or you're losing sight and you're not fit to compete when you come out the other end of this. That's why I'm saying this adversity is a great opportunity, because it's really going to test us. I remember saying to a playing group only a month ago, I said, if we tried to design a mental toughness camp, we couldn't have designed it any better than what this crisis is going to bring to us. So now you're in a mental toughness camp, and we're going to build your adaptive muscle over this period. We're going to build your capacity to cope and respond well. That's what we're going to do. We're going to dance in this space, embrace it and own it, and we'll be a better team as a result of experiencing it. That's what you guys can have also. Your purpose and your expectations might adjust. They might adjust, but it's important to keep them front and center. It's important to know what it is I can get from this. How do things in my life get enhanced as a result of this? If we look at win as an outcome thing, we all want to win. We all want to get to the best of what we can, get the best version of ourselves, make our organization successful, be out there. But what is winning like? We can look at winning all day long, but without a focus on the process, without a clear sense of what's important now, we're finished. we're not going to get to those top ends. So the big thing for you, if your team can answer this every day, if you as an individual can answer this every day, you're going to be in a much better place. It's not an easy thing to answer, but to be the best version of yourself, you've got to be able to answer that. Focus your team with this question. What's important now? What's important now? And what happens with the decision we make today? What does it affect? Does it affect this week? Does it affect 60 days beyond here, or does it affect beyond that? So look at that short, medium, long-term piece. This is a little assessment you can do, which for yourself, your observation of your own senior team, and then share it. Where do we think? So it's an assessment of crisis management and leading really well, where you rate yourself in that space. So it might be a nice little exercise just to see, well, how are we doing? We're 8 weeks in, where are we at? And are some of the characteristics of crisis leadership, are we living those ourselves? I think the big test of a crisis like this is our character, right? It's really testing our character during this time. So this is a quote by Patton, a general in the Second World War. A good plan, he says, violently executed now. I use effectively executed now. It's better than a perfect plan tomorrow. So being perfect in a crisis is going to be hell. And it's going to be hell for the people around you. If you're trying to be a perfect or a perfectionist type leader, you're going to kill people around you. You're going to stress them. This is let perfect go. Get stuff done. Get stuff done, right? Let go of your perfectionism right now. Get a good plan executed really, really well. On the leader's radar, some important things. You know what? You're in charge, but you're not in control. There's a lot of aspects that are impacting upon you. But use your charge to make good choices for you and the organization. Don't allow the problem to control you. Embrace it, love it, get engaged in it, get people curious about it, define it, play with it, right? Don't get controlled by it. Another key thing is self-preparedness. I talked about it earlier. And if you're demonstrating the importance of your personal preparation, you then exemplify that and you model that to the rest of the team, right? But if you're sending emails at 2 a.m, right? If you're turning up and you're all over the place on the Zoom call, people are looking and saying, well, what's wrong with Cal? Right? Where is he at? Is he all over the place or whatever? Make sure your self-preparedness is in the right place and talk about it. Because if you don't have yourself right, it's hard for you to get the organization prepared. But please remember, we're trying to prepare our organizations as much as we're trying to perform today. We're trying to perform today, but we're also trying to prepare to perform tomorrow and the next day and 12 months' time. So think about, we're preparing ourselves to go back. So you're going to bring employees back into the workplace in the next 8, 10, 12 weeks. What does that look like? They won't all come at the same time. What does preparedness look like? And it's not just you being prepared as a leadership team, it's then using that knowledge to prepare people on the ground to begin to prepare themselves. What do they need to do to be prepared? So that's critical, I think, also. Use your voice to cut through the noise. A lot of noise out there. And I know in this household, I see my eldest daughter and my wife on social media all the time. I avoid it. I look at the news on the TV and that's it. Maybe I'm old school. I don't know. But I can see that the distraction that the social media is causing, that's not good for leaders. We need to be, as I said, careful around our information sources. So acknowledge the reality. I'm sure you've done that already. Know there's an answer. There are several answers. We may not have them right now, so be honest, but provide hope. I believe in this team. I believe in this organization. I believe in our business. I believe in our customers. Be very, very clear. Right, this is difficult. This is the reality, but we will find a way. Now, Bruce Lee says it best when he says, adapt what's useful, reject what's useless, reject what's useless, right? And add what's specifically your own. Now, there's the big challenge. Add what's specifically your own, right? What's the brand of your leadership right now? What courage are you stepping in and putting into the place? Specifically your own. Please let us see it. We'll observe it, we'll feel it, we'll experience it, we'll respond to it. But let us see it. What's specifically your own? You've got to put yourself out there, because if you want to be measured as the guy or the girl who's delivered the team through, we've got to see you in this game. You've got to have skin in this game, and we've got to know what it is you're bringing to us. So it's a rocky bridge, but by God, do we have a checkered flag. we're going over that ridge, right? We have a sense of where we want to end up. We want to get out the right side of this. There's a couple of missing planks here. This bridge is going to wave, right? It's going to be uncertain and unsafe at times, but we start with the end in mind every day. Start with the end in mind. Try and get a sense of what that end in mind looks like. Try and get a statement around it that galvanizes people, that drives their focus. Let your everyday behaviors be dictated by that, and let their everyday behaviors be dictated like that. Create the reality with every choice that you make. Every choice you make, just keep trying to create that reality for yourself. And ultimately, time is limited and choices are finite. So you can't keep putting the choices off. You know, well, we could have made that choice yesterday. Well, why didn't you? Make good choices. Make good choices, because between now and the time you land into the next normal, you have a number of choices, but they're finite, they're limited. So use them well. Use your choices well during that time. And then my last piece is finish strong. That should be the aim. I want to finish strong, right? This is what it looks like. We've got to run our race. Here's our race strategy. We don't actually know what the course is. It's going to be up and down. Rain and thunder and hailstones might hit us along the way. So we expect that. We expect it. We're not surprised by it. Oh, Jesus, why did that happen? Or why did this happen? We expect it. We embrace it. So regardless of the resistance we receive, certainly I think the opponent within your organization should be removed. Complacency within your organization should be gone. The opponent should be outside, right? Not inside the organization, right? So whatever the resistance, whatever the adversity, we're coming through this. And we're going to grow and be better as a result of experiencing it, hopefully. And I know there's a harsh reality for a number of businesses out there. I know there are businesses like Bewley's that we just discussed earlier, right? And I really feel for those businesses. But I'm trying to talk about businesses that are going to try and find a way to get to the other side of this in the best way possible. So I think that's me, and thanks for listening.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Gary. Just so you know, your opening video has caused a big debate. So Mary from Tipperary is delighted. Obviously, as a Mayo woman, it was a tough one to watch, but I'll forgive you this time, all right? I've got a question all the way from Cork. So Rory, who's the GM of the River Lee down in Cork, is wondering kind of what your view is on timing. I suppose from their perspective, they're not sure, they don't have clarity on how and when they're going to reopen. So if you have any piece around kind of the role of timing in all of this.
It's a great question. I don't have an immediate obvious answer to it. I think that's the difficulty. I think it's trying to, this is going to be probably the strangest answer you've ever heard to this question. And that is to let the outcome go. Drop the outcome, right? Focus on what you think you need to do. So if it's going to be 8 weeks and it turns out to be 12 weeks, as long as you're ready for 8 weeks, you're going to be more ready by 12. Now, obviously to sustain yourself over the extra time in terms of cash flow and all the other elements that are important, I recognize that they are considerations. But if 8 weeks becomes 12 weeks or 12 weeks becomes 14 weeks, it doesn't matter. I remember a player saying to me, and this player was from Tipperary, by the way, so the Cork person who posed this question won't be happy with this. But I remember this piece around the endurance of the journey and holding our concentration over time. And he said, I don't care how long it takes. I just want to put the jersey on again. That's it. I just want to put that over my head again. And whatever time it is, I want to be ready for that moment. And I think that's the answer. Whether it's 10, 12, 14 weeks, there are considerations for sure, but it doesn't matter when it is, we're going to be ready to rock when that time comes. That's my best answer. Because you can't control the timing, I don't think. It will be potentially determined by others, not you.
Yeah. Cathal, I know you had, I think, a piece you wanted to add there, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I see in the chat there, Mary Ryan is very much flying the Tipperary flag, the blue and gold forever. Gary, many are struggling with this, managing this tension between performance and well-being. How do I look after somebody's well-being and then talk to them about performance and just that tension piece? Any insights in terms of the work you've done around how as leaders we need to straddle that tension between somebody's performance and their well-being?
Well, first I would say that the well-being of the individual is the responsibility of the individual, right? But secondly, I'd say it is incumbent upon leaders to recognize how performing or doing business impacts on people's well-being. All right, so to recognize the structures and supports and how we do our business. Like, so if we look at Zoom fatigue right now, if we look at the demand on calls, and we have lost sight of the fact of what we started to think about earlier in this crisis. We've lost sight of the fact that people are in family homes trying to manage families. Now, not everybody is in that situation, but a lot of people, a lot of employees are in that situation. And they might have two people working in the household. I know here, we've had a real challenge. My wife's diary is full every day, whereas my diary is different. I have to put stuff into my diary. So because I have more flexibility, it still created the struggle because I'm having to come in and work at different times of the day, and it's a real challenge. And that would affect well-being because if it impacts on the relationship at home and we're starting to argue about stuff, that's affecting our well-being. So I like a boss might say to somebody, you know, do the best you can. That's not helping the well-being. We need to actually provide some clarity around what's expected, if that makes sense. And that would really help. I don't need you to be everywhere, but I really need you to be here. So I don't want you to expect that you have to be on every meeting, but I really need you to be on top of these three things. So if you can nail that for us over this week or over this month, I'm going to be a very happy individual. So I think that's just give some guidance would really, really help, because I think people are fretting and anxious about, you know, having to be looking as if they're in the team and they're contributing. But this is about productivity. It's about doing the best job. So what does that look like? In the context of also trying to look after a family or look after a relationship at home.
Thanks, sir.
Great. I think with that, I know we're kind of 3 minutes to the hour now, so I think we'll begin to wrap up. So first of all, to say thank you everyone for your engagement this morning. We've had some fantastic pieces coming in around those leadership legacy elements, and the gratitude is beginning to wash in now for the session overall. And I'd like to pass on my personal thanks to Gary and Cathal. Fantastic session. Really great insights, some great visuals in there as well, and some great misquotes. So we'll try to not go ahead with violence too much in the next little while. Just before we wrap up, Cathal, do you want to speak into our webinar next week, next Thursday morning?
Sure, Fanny. Yeah, so just really quickly, Gary, thanks again for joining us. Brilliant stuff, great stimulus. Really, really appreciate it as you're trying to balance your own performance and well-being there. So thanks for taking the time out. So next week, the 14th, 10 o'clock, Jarlath Dooley version 1. Version 1 are an organisation that have spent many, many years now building a high trust culture. Jarlath is going to come on and share his insights, talk to us about what we can do really from today to start building trust and empowerment with our people. So that's next Thursday, 14th, 10 o'clock. We'll get an invite out in the next couple of days.
Brilliant. And with that, just to say thank you very much. Hope everybody stays safe. And we will talk to you all very soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.